And about an hour into unpacking, I started to feel dizzy, short of breath, and had pain in the left side of my chest, and sat down and checked my blood pressure. It was like 190 over 110. I mean, the reality is money is an important part of life. It doesn't fix all problems, but it does fix some of the problems. And
welcome to Through the Trauma podcast. My name is Amber Larkins, published photographer, storytelling expert, visual artist, entrepreneur, speaker, and coach. This podcast was born from one question: how do I get inspiring stories of triumph out to the people who need to hear them the most? Come with me, enter my world, where lives are getting changed, heroes are getting developed, and greatness is being achieved. And we are back with another episode of Through the Trauma podcast. I'm Amber Larkins, your host, and today I have with me Mr. Matt Gerlach. Now, Matt has a very interesting story because he is intuitive. He's learned a lot about his childhood trauma, and he is now been very successful and now helping other people tap into that same type of success and build businesses that they actually really love to do, not things that they just are doing. And I think sometimes it's very easy for us to get caught up in this hustle and bustle of building things, and we get really busy and we lose out on ourselves, and we lose out on figuring out what we're actually here to do. So Matt has done some extensive kind of inner child work. Is that safe to say, Matt?
that's safe to say.
Yeah. And now he's helping other people overcome these things. So thank you so much for being here with us. I really am happy to have you today, and so excited to get into some of these, this encouraging talk that we have today.
Thank you for having me. I'm grateful to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome. I was reading over just everything that you've done before we hopped on the call today, and pretty impressive resume there you have. I know that you've tapped into, you found success at a pretty early age, I would say, in your 30s, and grew your business to, was it 1 million a year? That's what you were doing?
We made $1 million a year, working about 15 to 20 hours a week doing that. And that happened after the healing work I've done. So it's not to brag, it's really the power of change, the power of healing.
So I want you to get into your story, but I first just want to ask you, because I know some people would ask, especially if they are struggling to get to that level of success, or any level of success really, like how can someone make it to that level of success and still be in content or non-content with where they're at?
Yeah, that's the question, right? I mean, it's like, when we're doing what we think we're supposed to be doing, when we're not doing what's actually fulfilling us, we end up, when we're prioritizing money, chasing after somebody else's definition of success. That's how I got to where I was at. And I also think that there's a certain level of privilege when you get, I think the reason that I allowed myself to be unfulfilled was because I had saved a cushion. I'd been responsible with my money, and I'd saved a cushion, and I realized that I could go after the next thing now. I mean, the reality is money is an important part of life. It doesn't fix all problems, but it does fix some of the problems. And when I'm working with clients and encouraging people on how to build their own successful lives, I mean, a financial cushion or living with somebody or whatever it might be is a part of the equation. But I think in life, success is more than money. And that's really what I help people with, people that have done everything right, that have proven in themselves they have the success from a financial point of view to now go after the freedom and the fulfillment.
So do you think that sometimes this comes from people not being clear on their purpose? Maybe they're just working towards goals, but not really knowing what purpose they serve.
I do think that. I think that the topic of fulfillment or the topic of purpose is different for a lot of people. I think there are a lot of people that don't necessarily have the same need to be spending their professional life living their purpose the way that I do, the way that some people do. I mean, I think a lot of people are happy going to work or, doing whatever they are doing with their day and not necessarily having it be as purpose driven as me. But I also think it's part of the journey. I think that some people, I think the reason that I've gotten to this place is a lot because I've done the healing work and I've realized how much of my life was being was lived misaligned. I think, or I like to say this, like if it wasn't for the wake up call that I had, I might have just skated north of rock bottom my entire life. And I think a lot of us just, it's human nature. We're not going to make massive changes until something in our life requires that change. And if we're living at like a medium level, there's nothing wrong with that medium, but there's nothing that really provokes us to take the next drastic change, then we likely won't make that drastic change.
So tell us a little bit about your background, where you came from, what your story is, and how you got to this level of success, yet also unfulfillment.
Sure. So I am 41. I live in Los Angeles, born and raised in Los Angeles. And I always just kind of like took a job that somebody would have me. I wasn't discerning at all. I applied for, and this is my first job as at an ice cream store, and I just kind of went with whoever would take me. And I'd always been successful. I didn't come from a lot of wealth at all. I didn't know what good money was. So I was as successful as I believed I was worth. But, as the story unfolds, I moved to New York later after college, and I realized that, like, I thought that successful business people made $100,000 and doctors and lawyers made $200,000. I was wrong. So once I got that perspective and realized that there's people making 10, 20, 30 times as much as I am for similar levels of aptitude, that really changed things for me. So went to college, like I said, and, I sold metal after college, and in 2008, I was selling metal. The economy hit us hard, and I went to New York. I'd always wanted to live in New York, and I landed a job in consumer product sales, and it was a really fun job. The job, actually, my pay went up significantly. It was a startup company, and they really rewarded people based off of their hard work and performance. Kind of just like navigated this consumer product sales world for a couple of years. I went into a software sales role. So like the theme of my kind of professional life was I did keep up leveling, and I kept making more money and trying to find that fulfillment. And I was laid off from a job in software sales, which wasn't necessarily a huge surprise. I mean, the company wasn't going in the positive direction. And I sort of just like was stifled. I had saved money too. Like I didn't have like, tons and tons, but I could have lived for a few months without making money and totally been okay in hindsight. But I was frantic and just driven by scarcity. I asked a friend, like, what should I do? I don't want to really work for somebody else. This software sales job offered an incredible amount of freedom. I mean, you could just we had to work, but like you could not show up to work and work from wherever. And I was like, I can't go back to like having to be at an office the way that I had always been. So somebody said, why don't you start a consulting business? I said, okay, that sounds like a good idea. How? And they were like, Matt, I am so busy, but I can give you 30 minutes 3 times this week in the morning while I drive my kids to school. So I did that. I got the lessons from her. She sent me her proposal, and off to the races I went. And I built a sales agency and growth consultancy for consumer product brands. And immediately I was just completely overwhelmed with stress. It was my background being trauma. I had always thought it was my job to pretty much control every situation and make sure that everyone else was happy. So I was completely overloaded with work. I didn't know boundaries. I didn't know how to value myself appropriately. So I was doing everything I needed to do to make my clients' businesses grow the way that I said they would. I didn't necessarily think of the infrastructure they had, and it was just insane. I was running myself completely into the ground. Anxiety turned into depression. And actually, to be clear, I didn't realize it was anxiety. I guess I did, but I didn't think emotional health mattered, is really the truth back then. And so I felt really sad, I would say, really worried and really sad. And then went to the doctor. The doctor found out that I had high blood pressure, which was no big surprise considering I was smoking a pack a day of cigarettes and drinking in the evenings to calm my nerves, smoking pot, all evening to sleep. And just, it was insane what I was doing to myself. But then I started really panicking about the blood pressure, because I cared about my health despite all of this, but I didn't see any way out. My partner and I decided to move back to LA where I was from. And on the day we moved, everything was normal. I'd been on a plane a few times the week prior, just busy as can be. Every moment was planned. The morning we left New York, everything was I would have said it was a good morning. And we got on the plane, had a glass of champagne. We're starting our new lives together. And we landed LAX, go to the apartment that we had rented prior to arrival. And about an hour into unpacking, I started to feel dizzy, short of breath, and had pain in the left side of my chest and sat down and checked my blood pressure. It was like 190 over 110. That's very high for those of you that might not know. And called my doctor. It didn't go down. She said, go to the hospital. And I spent my first night in LA in the hospital thinking I might be dying of a heart attack. So that sent me on a massive healing journey. I went to go see, I didn't know emotional health mattered. And I was seeing a therapist, but it wasn't like the best therapist. She was not helpful in a big way. And that's a big part of therapy. When we're going to therapy, we need to find someone who's actually a good fit for us. But I was going to a pulmonologist, cardiologist, addiction specialist, a head and neck surgeon. I couldn't breathe very well. And I was just trying to treat these physical health problems, trying to figure out what was wrong with me. And then finally I got to a neurologist and he was like, Matt, I've seen this a million times. Meanest man ever. He was like, don't ever come back here. You don't need to see a neurologist. What you're suffering from is plain old anxiety, and you got to go see a therapist or whatever and go get medication from somebody, but you don't need a neurologist. And I doubled down on therapy at that point. My partner and I started couples therapy, and really it became a journey of really uncovering, like, what is this anxiety like? And learned, my mom and my grandparents, everyone had anxiety in my family, but it was just no reason to be debilitated. Everyone was forced to just keep on going. My family, there was people that had a lot of migraines. There was just like there was no, like, mental health anguish was really no reason to rest. You slow down when your leg's falling off or something. And so eventually I was at a couples therapy session with my partner and my couples therapist. And she, like, I was trying to share something that I needed from my partner, David. And she pushed me. We had been seeing her pretty regularly and we had a good relationship, but she was pushing me too hard. And she was like, Matt, tell David what you need. Tell David what you need. And I'm like, I can't. And then I just burst out into tears and it all comes flooding out. And I say, I've always been punished for my needs. I'm afraid if I tell David what I need, he's going to leave me. And then she's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to push you this hard. She's like, I didn't realize that you were at this place. You're in your own therapy and stuff. And I just really didn't know that you had so much disdain for your own needs. And then from there, I knew what to treat. I knew I needed to go back to my childhood and really reparent myself and address all of the limiting beliefs and all the trauma that had happened. And by doing so, everything in my life changed.
But, you bring up a really interesting point, because this whole thing of, since I've been doing this podcast, I've seen and I've talked to different people where they talk about how the body really does keep the score. So there's a book called that if you're familiar with it. But it's so true. And what you're saying is like so true. You had all of these things that you had been dealing with, kind of baggage that you've been carrying through your whole life. And it took something like a health issue to get you to the place that, hey, I need to get this seen about. Actually, I don't even think you came to that point where you said, hey, I need to get this seen about. You did stress about it, which kind of exacerbated the problem, I would say. But it was like till you were, quote, lost your leg, but you were, having these heart problems and you go to the hospital, and this led you on this journey of finding what this thing is that, and a lot of times I think people will look at these kinds of things as a negative experience. I personally think they're a positive experience because it sets you on the trajectory of figuring out what this is. And now on an entire healing journey, because this was, how many years ago was this?
This was almost 8 years ago.
So 8 years. And now, I'm sure we're going to get into what the next 8 years was like. But, you bring up this interesting point for anyone that is listening. You can go and go and go and go, but eventually the body is probably going to shut down, or something happens where you have to stop. And it's a blessing, not a curse, because it can set you on the right trajectory. So when this happened to you, did you see it as that, or were you like, oh my gosh, I can't be slowing down? Because I know sometimes people with this kind of personality that is constantly doing, and, high level people have a hard time slowing down.
Yeah, I love what you said, and thank you for driving this point home. The wake up call, we are lucky to get a wake up call like this. And I was very lucky to get it early enough in life where, generally people aren't dying of heart attacks, but if I would have waited until I was 65 years old and this happened, this might have been the end of me. And this kind of leads into the next question that you just asked, but no, I didn't slow down right away. I was very lucky that I was young enough that like my body could still more than likely allow that. No, I mean, I was debilitated from the anxiety, and I had started having panic attacks during this whole episode after we moved to LA, where I could barely even drive. I mean, I couldn't drive on the freeway at all. Oftentimes I'd get behind the wheel in the morning to go to the gym, and I just couldn't do it. And I would just like, it was honestly one of the worst times of my entire life because I just felt so helpless. And it always like, it was such a shock to me to see this, that I couldn't get myself to the grocery store. I was Ubering to doctor's appointments. But at the same time, I could get myself in an Uber from my apartment to the airport to New York and be living a life in Manhattan for business and out entertaining clients. And I could do all that, but I couldn't drive myself to the grocery store in LA. So I think a lot of it was like, I was so depressed that this was happening that I sort of like, I had to do what, I mean, I don't want to say I had, I guess I chose, but I was so depressed that I chose to continue to do what I can, to do what I could to numb the discomfort and numb the depression I was feeling. And that really made the shame. I mean, I really suffered from a lot of shame because I knew what I was doing to myself, that I was continuing to drink too much, continuing to smoke cigarettes when I had high blood pressure. It was really a vicious cycle. And underneath all of that was still like, I needed to work through this trauma and realize that like where I'm at now, and realizing that life does provide for us what we need, and that sometimes it doesn't look like the way it's supposed to. And we need to listen to our bodies. And what my body was telling me was to slow down. And like I said, I'm very lucky that I've been young enough to kind of weather the storm, but I help people right now a lot that are not quite so young. I'm 41 right now. And if this happened to me now, I don't know that I would have 8 years to sort of figure this out the way that I did. I would need to make changes sooner. But
a lot of people, I'm sorry to cut you off, but a lot of people have this thing with trauma where they stuff it and they don't want to deal with it. And I think it's really sad in our culture. I don't think that we're not taught really how to deal with trauma, how to come face to face, how to feel that, release it, like really how to deal with it in our lives. So a lot of people stuff it back, and then it manifests. It comes out in different ways, which, your story is a perfect example of that. At what point did you realize this is some deeper issues that I've got to get to the bottom of to get this out of my life and to thrive on the other side of this?
Yeah, I mean, it was a journey. I mean, like, I wish that I could say there was like one exact moment, but when I look back at this, I'll never have the answer, but I don't know how many therapists or doctors or people were like, Matt, you need to look at your childhood. You need to look at your childhood. Maybe no one said that blatantly. I'm not sure. But once I realized that after that the couples therapist moment, I was definitely I was suffering so bad that I couldn't ignore it. So I did start to inquire about my childhood. And one of the big things, one of the big moments where things started to change for me was I joined yoga teacher training. I had started doing yoga a few years prior, and that offered relief. And I didn't know exactly why or how, but I wanted to double down on the things that felt good. That's the crazy thing during this whole journey, of kind of a version of self-destruction. I was going to the gym every single day. I was eating relatively healthy. Sometimes. I mean, I was drinking a lot of water, but I was taking care of myself in a lot of ways. And I see pictures of myself from that time. I look better than ever. I mean, I was skinnier than I had ever been because I, wasn't eating as much as I normally do. And it's funny, a lot of what people were saying to me was you look fine on the outside. And it's really hard to hear. But yeah, I think that the moment that this really started to change for me was during yoga teacher training, which is like an 8-hour day. And, there's time to be journaling and stuff. And I would just sit there and I wrote TTCU, things that came up. And I'm just kind of journaling about these childhood memories that I have and starting to unpack them. And it was the first time I was in a room, yoga teacher training, with other people who were talking about, a group that was talking about their emotional anguish and things that had happened in their lives. And it was really sort of the catalyst for realizing my yoga teacher taught this concept of both. And it really opened my mind and my heart to be able to acknowledge the truth of what happened. So both, it's just that both could be true. Your parents could have tried their best and they could have hurt you. Things could have, you could be really doing everything right, but it still feels like it's wrong. I mean, both things could happen at the same time. And that really opened me up to realizing that like I need to be honest about what I remembered about my childhood. And to be honest, like it wasn't all at home. I mean, I had no friends at school. I'm a gay man. I'm not sure if I've said that yet, but like I don't know that I knew that I was gay at 10, 11, 12 years old, but I knew something was different about me. And I definitely remember thinking that if people found out about that I might even suffer consequences like death or something, like that somebody could kill me or something if they found that I was gay. So I was just holding this all in my entire life. And once I realized that the path through would be the path towards healing, I got pretty comfortable with it. And then, my parents and I ended up having a pretty big falling out where we didn't talk for a few years. And as painful and sad as that was, it was really necessary for me to be able to proceed down my healing journey without anybody else's opinions and just the concept of both. Like I don't need anybody else. Like I've learned to trust my story, and my story certainly isn't going to be what somebody else's is, and that's fine. They can have their version of the story. But really, I would say a lot of my work, like the message of what I really help people with is prioritizing ourselves. It doesn't mean like being selfish, but it means when you have to say yes to yourself before you're saying yes to other people. It was just the more that I started to really just like be honest with myself and investigate introspection, what I call it, just really learning like my story and journaling about it, the more I got to, the more ammunition, the more data I had to bring to therapy, to bring to my coaching practices and be able to work with people on. But it's funny now, like as I coach other folks right now, the people that get the most out of it are the ones that are coming to the sessions, with a thought dump at least, and I'm happy to help people pull it out of them as well. But like when I look back to my notes from therapy, I came with agendas and like, okay, here's what Monday was like. Here's what happened. Here's what I remembered. And it was just a process of really having to kind of pull this out of me. And that's why, like, when I work with people now, like, I really try to like get to the root of what's going on a lot faster. And I think a lot of therapists and even coaches are scared to go there. They're letting you kind of get to that spot on your own. And there's a time and a place for that. But I could have saved a lot of time if I would have had somebody really, get the I'm gonna get the rubbish away and I'm gonna get to the heart of it sooner.
I think with anything, like I come from the fitness industry and I can tell you I compare everything back to fitness, but it's so relevant because if you have somebody that wants to get in shape, they still have to do the work. You can hire a coach to help you, but your coaches can only help you so far as you're putting in the work. If you have trauma and you come and sit down with someone that's going to help you through that trauma, you have to be ready to release that stuff. Or if you're not doing the inner work, it's not going to work for you. You're not going to get the full benefit out of it. And I think that this is something I just reflected on recently, actually. We had kind of a healing event, and I'd invited some different people, and I actually had someone tell me, I'm not ready for that. I had to, in my own mind and in my own heart, because I'm on a growth journey. I want to grow. And I'm like, I can't help someone. If you don't want to grow, you don't want to get better, you don't want to release some of these things, then, if you're not ready and you want to carry that stuff around, then I don't know what to tell you. It's just like someone coming to hire a health coach or saying, I'm not really ready to get in the gym yet. If you're not ready to get in the gym yet, you're not going to see results. You're just going to stay unhealthy, uncontent with how you look and feel. And, it's sad, but it's so true. So I think that, I'm sure you do this with your clients, people that come to you wanting to see these results. It's almost like you have to qualify them to say, hey, are you in a place? Are you really ready to heal these things? Get rid of these things, face the inner demons and the inner child and the stuff. But once you're free, my God, there's like so much freedom on the other side of that. It's a beautiful life, really. Can you speak a little bit to that? Because I know now you've found this place of contentment. Am I correct in saying that?
Contentment with the waves of life. Like my partner and I are going through surrogacy right now, we're building careers. I look at life right now and I would say that it's maybe the most chaotic it's ever been, but it's like when you learn to roll with it and learn that you can't necessarily control everything, there's a contentment with that that's a lot more everlasting. But yeah, so like, and I love what you said. this is the beauty of the wake-up call. Like, as a human being, we're not conditioned to generally volunteer to make massive changes until things get uncomfortable enough that a change has to be made. You're not as likely to say, hey, I want to have, better health until your doctor tells you your cholesterol is too high. We need some sort of push to have that happen a lot of times. But this contentment, so much of it's come from just like learning that, like, there's three pillars really that I would like describe of like the other side of this work. And one of them is acceptance. It's accepting yourself for who you are. It's accepting yourself of not having to be perfect. The other one is forgiveness, and it's forgiveness for yourself, forgiveness for others. This was a huge thing. I mean, there's been a lot of things in my life that I've done that I wish I didn't do. And it's been really hard because that's where the shame comes from. And once you like get to accept yourself and forgive yourself for the things that you wish weren't choices you made, you get to like have this level of freedom that is just almost indescribable. And the reality is we are all flawed human beings. And those of us who are healed or evolved, we're able to acknowledge that. We're not expecting that of ourselves. We're not expecting that of others. And it allows us to live in this life of abundance, which is really the third pillar. It's just like, it's this abundance, and it's not necessarily a certain condition that exists outside of us. Sure, life is, it's enhanced a bit when there's more financial freedom, when there's more comfort and such. But like the abundance really comes from within, when we know that we are enough, when we know that the universe will provide for us, when we know that there's a plan. Right now, like I look at my life and there's a lot of, there's a lot of waves. And I don't know exactly where things are going to end up for me. I don't know what the plan exactly is. But like, as I lean into that and I lean into the unknown, it goes both ways. Things can equally as likely, if not more likely, become more beautiful and more abundant than what I can imagine. So I think that like when we get to this level of growth and of healing, we're able to embrace that and realize that life is filled with ups and downs, and success is not a linear road. And I think that that's the challenge, that those of us who are suffering with trauma, side effects with trauma in our past, we have this need to control everything. And the reality is we can't control everything in life. Nobody can control everything. All we can control is how we show up every day, and having the wisdom to know what's within our control and what's not in our control, and give ourselves rest and recovery when we've done our best. Mm-hmm. That's not the Matt Gerlach you would have heard 5 years ago. I hear it. And honestly, I just can't even believe that it's possible to get to a point where you just trust that it's all going to work out. But that's where the magic is.
And I think that thing of control, it's like you have to be able to separate what things you can control and what things you can't. I can't control other people's responses or reactions or whatever towards me, but I can control how I respond back to them. I can control my actions, or am I loving people, or am I being kind, or am I being supportive? Am I being empathetic? Like, I can control all of those things. But if someone comes up and like, punches you in the stomach, you can't necessarily control that. Sometimes people do things to us that hurt, and that's a physical representation, but a lot of times it's more mental or emotional is what ends up hurting us. And that trauma can happen as a child and can be carried throughout your entire life. And so these are areas that have to be dealt with for you to fully step into that person that you're really created to be, I think. So, at least that's been my experience in journeying through my own trauma. And I agree with you. It's a journey. It's, one day you wake up and you're like, I've got this, I've healed. And then the next day you're triggered and you're like, oh, I'm not healed. I still got some stuff I got to deal with.
But the fluctuations like that get better. They happen less frequently and they're less extreme. And I would say that generally, like, they get better and better and better. And I think that when we get to this point of enlightenment, I'm kind of laughing because that's kind of the goal in life, but we never really get there. But like when we really can roll with things and recognize that like life is happening for us and not to us, it changes everything, like you said. But yeah, it's a journey. But I think that like the more that we're willing to be honest with ourselves and investigate our feelings, like using the example of the person that comes up and punches you in the gut, when you learn to look at that situation, and hopefully that never happens to anybody, it hasn't happened to me, thank goodness, but like if somebody does that to us, that person is suffering. There's a reason they're doing it. Like there's something that they're struggling with in life, and we start to see the world as a whole. And doing our part in it, being the best human we can be, offering people grace and teaching them compassion and looking at situations like that with more of curiosity, more so than reflexivity about being angry at somebody like that. We are all struggling with things, and there's so much trauma in the world. And
I
go
think what you
ahead.
just said was super beautiful, by the way. Like, I think that's so true. It's so true. And that comes with having empathy for people too. Like, hey, this person just hurt me or did something to me or cut me off in traffic or did whatever, and it's a nuance, but let me step into their shoes for a second. What's going on with them? Why are they responding this way? Why do they feel the need to hurt me? Sometimes it's not personal. Sometimes it's just they're an angry person.
The other day I had this wasn't the other day, it was a couple months ago, but I had it wasn't the best day, but I roll with things better. So I don't want to say it was a horrible day, but it wasn't the best day. It was a day that could have brought somebody else down pretty low. And I went into a parking spot. Apparently somebody else was waiting for it. He got out of his car and was ready to fight me. And I'm grateful that I wasn't activated. I was like, okay, and I moved my car and everything. But it was I laughed. I was like, this guy has no idea that I am today's a very low day. And here he is getting mad at me for something that I innocently didn't know I was doing. And still debatable whether I was wrong or he was right. It doesn't matter really. But it was just that's what our world is like in so many instances. We're so reactive, and it's really sad, because if I would have been in a different place, if I would have been at the same level he would have been at, I guess we would have fought,
Or someone would have backed away, one of the two.
Yeah.
I had a similar situation just over the weekend. I was in Walmart, which I really hate going to Walmart. I'm sorry if anybody loves Walmart, but I don't know if it's the area I live in or what, but it brings the worst mindset of people, I feel like. And I'm shopping, not even paying attention, looking at comparing some prices on some vegetables. And this lady is right there, and she's I could feel her staring at me with an evil eye. And I turn around and I'm like, oh, am I in your way? I'm sorry. And she's like, yeah. Yeah, you're in my way. And in the back of my mind, I just thought I just hate being around people with this mindset, because I'm very friendly. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Let me move out of the way, even though I wasn't really done shopping. But it's just the bottom line, it takes nothing to be polite to people. But when people are rude to you, I just look at it I don't know what has happened in her life that she doesn't want to deal with. There's something there. Because why do you want to be an angry person?
I think a lot of the problem with trauma, this has been sort of my stance on this. I think there's people out there that are afraid or averse to healing, and I respect that. I very much respect that. I don't think that's a fair excuse though. One of the things that really changed my life was when I heard the phrase, it's not your fault what happens to you, but it's your responsibility to heal that. And that really fundamentally changed me when I heard that, so I think it's okay to be afraid. It's okay to say, I need some more time. But I think the problem that we're having in the world right now is there's so many people that are struggling and suffering that don't know that they even have anything to heal. If you were to ask a lot of people, if you were to ask my dad, he would say, I'm fine. I pushed it all behind me, and it's that's not exactly true, Dad. And I think that a lot of people, I think he genuinely thinks that there's nothing to investigate at all.
But I think that's why it's why people like you and you have a podcast as well, and you're speaking out on these things. I think it's why we have a kind of a moral obligation to spread the word and say, hey, you know what? It's okay. And everybody has the stuff they got to deal with, the ugly things on the inside. But there is freedom on the other side of it as well.
It's embracing the vulnerability of it. I'm amazed how many people sign up to have a call with me and, they just come and pour their hearts out. I'm amazed in a good way. I'm like, oh my God, it's I'm so encouraged to see that there's this many people out there in the world that are embracing their vulnerability or have done this level of contemplation of their life. It's really beautiful, and I'm sort of at this place where I sort of I don't like to prescribe people you have to meditate. And I don't think you have to meditate. I do kind of think I'm kind of changing my mind a little bit. I do think you have to journal. I do think I mean, maybe to work with me, like, like the way that I'm kind of like finding, like so much of my healing modalities come from writing, come from getting these thoughts and feelings outside of us and getting them in a place where they can be examined. It doesn't need to be written on paper. It doesn't need to be like in a certain binder, but like it needs to be like excavated somehow, whether it's typing. I started typing my first journals when I did that. And you can even write it on scratch paper and tear it up later or something. But like there's some sort of like just unique ability that journaling and writing allows to get these thoughts out of us. And so like I hate to prescribe anything to somebody, but I just think journaling is the best bang for anyone's buck because it helps you get acquainted with what's really going on inside you. And it's free, it's flexible, you can do it at any time. I'm amazed by how many people ask like how to do this. You can do it however you want to. You can start every day with like a how am I question and just write 3 sentences, 1 sentence. It all works. There's no wrong way to do this.
I had a therapist that come on and I interviewed this therapist and she said that one of the top things she would recommend is journaling. So I think you're onto something there. And I've heard of doing journaling where you just ask a question and then you just write and don't even pay attention to what you're writing and then go back and read it. And it's like the question gets answered.
Like it's been a huge help for my anxiety too. Like this has been sort of like something I did in 2024. I would really like pay attention to like the changes throughout the week. So on Sunday mornings, I would go back and read the prior week. And I got to see that like things that I was anxious about or worried about on a Monday, 99.9% of them resolved themselves by Wednesday. I got to see that like on the weekends when I would overindulge on food and alcohol, like my anxiety was a little bit higher on Monday and Tuesday than it was after 2 or 3 days of eating perfectly and eating vegetables and taking really good care of myself. And I think that's the thing. I mean, we're all humans, we're all flawed. And it's just like this commitment to perpetually improving that just changes everything. And it takes time. And it's been the hugest part of my journey to really like learn to just accept myself, that I'm doing the best I can and allowing myself to be imperfect while I continue to examine and make the changes that I want to make to be the person that I want to be.
Now, in what you're doing, the consultancy that you're doing now and the coaching, is there a spiritual aspect to that? Do you believe in God or a higher power?
Yeah, I'm just coaching now. I don't have the consulting side of my business anymore, just to be clear. Yeah, it's funny. So at the beginning of 2024, so last year, I read a book called You're a Badass by a woman named Jen Sincero.
I love that book. I have it. I read it too. It's great.
It is such a good book. Honestly, someone gave it to me like 7 years ago and I never read it. I mean, I started reading it and it wasn't right. And then I picked it up just randomly. Like it was actually December of 2023. And I was like, holy heck, like this is like exactly what I needed. And she said something in the book that really struck me. It's that, I've coached thousands of people or whatever. And there's one thing I can promise you, without some element of faith, you'll never be able to reach your full capacity. And that really made a lot of sense to me. I'm a graduate of yoga teacher training, so I believe in Buddhism. I see a lot of benefits in that. I've recently taken a Kabbalah workshop and like learning more about that. So I don't necessarily have I don't know that my God is a man in the sky. I don't know that it's not either. I'm kind of at the place of really exploring what makes sense for me. But I absolutely believe that there is a higher power and that things happen for a reason. I think that, some people might say, like, why did this horrific thing happen? I mean, life is suffering. Buddhism teaches us that there is some suffering that happens in life and there is some things that we can't explain. And, it's awful that we have to go through hard things, but like the hard things are invitations to grow. And I absolutely believe that everything is happening for a reason. And I believe that so much, I just believe and I can attest to the level of I don't think I'd be who I am right now if I didn't read that book a little over a year ago and really start embracing faith. Like if you're looking for a guarantee before you make any changes in life, you won't be able to make the changes. There's not guarantees. And when I look at the people, a big part of my life is reading. It's something that I just think, I mean, even just listening to podcasts or audiobooks, but learning from other people's stories and learning from the things that other people have been through. There's no new situations. None of us are that unique in what we're going through. I mean, everyone's been through something like that, what we're going through before. And I just I look at the common thing the common thing in the people who are living lives that I aspire to live. they all had an element of belief that it was just going to work out. They believed in themselves. And that to me ties back very strongly to the spirituality practice and faith practice that's highly accessible to anybody. Just believing that there's a reason that everything is happening in life and that it's not explainable.
Well, and
There's so much freedom in that.
humans are very complex beings. Like really, our brains are extremely complex. I'm reading a book right now called The Emotion Code. Have you read that book?
I have not, but I read a lot, so I'm surprised I
Well,
haven't had
so
that,
it's
that
set
way.
in it has set in my Audible library for weeks. And I'm just like, it doesn't seem that interesting. And then I started reading it. Well, I started listening to it yesterday, and I couldn't put it down. But it's talking about how everything functions on energy and the brain. And it's just some deep stuff that I find completely interesting. But it goes back to this thing. Bottom line is humans are so complex and our brains are so complex. And I think we can spend a lifetime getting to the end of like, why things happen, what's going on inside of there? Why do I store certain things? How can I release these things? How can I find the things? Certain things that we shut out for trauma, we don't even try to remember, or we try to forget because of, it's traumatic. It's so traumatic to us. How do we tap into those things? But I think that's, you're right on. Like, you have to have some element of humans are so complex and this life is a journey of figuring out who we are. But I honestly believe that everything is inside of us that we need. Like God created us in a way that where we can ask the subconscious and the subconscious tells us the answer. This book is huge about talking about how to kind of quiz your self-conscious, I guess. But there's things, and this goes back to journaling, which is why I even ask you the question, because I think that when you journal, there's things that can come out of your subconscious that you don't even know is there. You just go through the motions of writing it, and it's like your subconscious, which I believe is through God or a higher power, is like, well, here, let me show you all these things. You go back and read it, and you're like, wow, I didn't even know all that stuff was there. But it's intriguing. And to your point, I also just want to make this point about things being hard in life. You said it. It's growth. And the way that I've really looked at this in my own life is when, again, going back to fitness, when I work out, if I want my muscles to grow, I've got to break it apart. I got to break the fibers. I've got to hurt it. I'm sore for several days after, but that's how my muscle's going to grow. So I think it's mentally, it's the same. If I'm wanting to grow, I've got to go through the hardships. It's not something I would choose, but when it's dealt to me, embrace that and move past it and start, instead of asking, why me, ask the questions, how can I become stronger because of this? How can I deal with this to the best of my ability to become more of who I'm supposed to be? So sometimes I think we're just not asking the right questions.
Thank you for saying that. It's actually like super resonant. Like, I think there's a couple things about that. I guess like trauma by nature is it's trauma because we're really not supposed to talk about it. We're supposed to accept what happened. We're supposed to, like, when trauma is somebody violating us and it's confusing, what are we supposed to do with this? And then a lot of times happens from a loved one. And I think that's the hard part. Like when people don't want to heal, I think a lot of it is because we're going to have to make a change. We're going to have to go against someone who's in our life and say, this person hurt me, this person violated me. And I think that when we have survived trauma like that, we built our life on trying to avoid pain. And what you said is so resonant. And I just had a thought this morning because I'm sort of in like a place right now where I've been in business my whole life. Like I never really knew that I had any options. And as I'm taking this next phase of my life, taking the bull by the horns and really committed to this feeling really good. I had a pretty good situation, making a lot of money and not that many hours a week of work. And I realized like I already had a situation that I felt quite miserable in, and I don't want that again. And any entrepreneurs that are out there will know what I'm talking about. But like navigating an entrepreneurial journey, you're kind of creating something that doesn't exist. And it's a lot of power. And when I started my consulting business, I followed somebody else's model, so I didn't really give myself the opportunity to have so many choices. And these past few weeks, I've tapped into my intuition. You and I were talking about this a little bit before, but I want to make something that feels really good for me. And I found this creative side of myself that I don't know that I had. And that was because, my life became about survival and I wasn't able to really follow, creativity. I was more concerned with just putting food on the table for myself. And so I started writing a book a few years ago. I actually recently started writing a second one. And amongst many other hobbies, I have found an undeniable love for cooking. So over these past couple of months, I've started to host people in my house, groups of entrepreneurs and executives and people that I can help. And it's been so exciting to bring this food part of my life and marry it with like the mentorship side of my life as well. And as I'm starting to like really lean into what's possible, I'm realizing this is a cookbook. This is like helping people create beautiful homes, create beautiful lives, entertain. And it's just like, I never would have thought in a million years that I'd be sitting here, like exploring this creative side of me. And I realized I've been able to handle the financial implications of a change. I've been able to handle the stress part of it. I work out, I go to yoga, I meditate, but what I realized this morning, there's a painful side of this to the unknown. And I realized that, and we know this, but I really, really sat in this for a few minutes and realized that change is painful. It's exactly what you said. We're growing and there is no way to grow without experiencing pain. And my job right now, my clients' jobs, as we're working to make ourselves into a better, more authentic, more abundant version of ourselves, is to learn to sit in that pain and that we're not going to die from it, which is life is challenge and pain. And the hope is it shouldn't be that painful, and that's why I like yoga so much, because we learn when we're sitting in poses, you are supposed to sit through an uncomfortable pose. When your knee has a sharp shooting pain, you are not supposed to sit through that. You are supposed to get up and say, this pose is not for me. But when your knee is uncomfortable, you're having trouble focusing, you're supposed to try to sit through that to the best of your ability, embrace the discomfort, and learn how to focus in times of a lot of distraction. But that's the work. And I think that's why so many of us who have trauma in our past, we aren't living our fullest lives. A lot of us, because we are afraid to face that pain that it takes to make our life into what we really want it to be. And that's it. Just embrace the pain. You're golden.
That's awesome. I was getting ready to say, what's your takeaways here? I think you just dropped it on us. That's so true. It's so true. I do have one last question pertaining to this though. So now that you are in this place where it sounds to me like you are in a place where you're giving back on a level of I've done all this work. I want to pull as many people along this path with me and to also come over on this side of freedom and fulfillment and embracing the beauty of life, really. And in making that shift from doing what you were doing, making, over $1 million a year to then now, and I don't know, you may still be doing that in your coaching business, but I think the main point here is doing something that is unfulfilling to you, to now doing something that is super fulfilling to you. What is that how would you tell people to make that shift, or to even recognize that they need to make that shift?
When you've done everything that you've been told to do and you still feel like something is missing, it's time to inquire. It's time to see what that actually is. We need to learn also, we're put on this earth. We are unique individuals. We're put on this earth to serve others. And we all have a journey. We all have something to offer people. Maybe that is going back to what we talked about earlier. Maybe that is turning your pain and your story into your purpose, and that becomes your job. Or maybe it is volunteering on the weekend while you are a school principal on the weekdays or whatever, doing something that maybe isn't exactly as purposeful as, my path, but there is an element of helping others that we're supposed to be doing. If you feel called to, maybe you're not called to that and you're very content with what you're doing right now. Inquire. If there's something nagging at you, if something's wrong, if something's not feeling right, if you have a lot of thoughts and a lot of fears that you're keeping to yourself. Those are all invitations to inquire. And you may not be in a situation that's as dire as mine, and that's really great. But then it's also like you might not ever have that wake up call. I really believe in synchronicity, and kind of like a few weeks ago when I was really kind of like deep in the throes of like, oh my gosh, like, this intuition is telling me to follow it. One of my best friends told me about her dad. He's in his 70s right now. He just retired, and he had a health catastrophe, and he's probably not going to be able to enjoy his retirement by any means to the level that he was supposed to. And it just really reminded me, like, this is a story that happens, and it didn't just happen to my friend's dad. It happens to millions and millions of people every year who are putting off enjoyment until a later date that never comes. And if you feel like that journey, like that path isn't right for you, inquire. And going back to what you said, no, as I'm transitioning, I'm not making $1 million at this exact moment. And it's been interesting to really like ask myself, like, what do I really want for this part of my life? And like one of the first things was like, I heard all this wisdom, like you should be creating a business so you can sell it. And I had to kind of grapple with that. Like, I'm not creating a business so I can sell it. That's not what I'm looking to do. Like, I'm looking to create a business that I want to work in until I'm 75 years old. And a lot of that is writing. I mean, and I don't want to work 40 hours a week or anything close to that when I'm 75. Maybe writing, I don't know, but no, I don't want to be working really hard when I'm 75 years old. So I made that decision about that. And, a lot of this is like, this is where the faith comes in. I mean, money is great. Who doesn't want to make a lot of money? I mean, and we're all allowed to want to make a lot of money. But I think it's been really important for me, as I come from this scarcity around money and this financial trauma that I grew up with. I had to really rejigger the way that I've been looking at money, and it's okay to still want money. But when I really look at what's most important for me right now, it is how I want to spend my days. If you were to look through my journals, you would see, at this point, probably a couple hundred iterations of like what I want my ideal week to look like over the past couple of years, writing that down. And for me, that's more important than the money aspect. And I live in Los Angeles, and life is not cheap here. And there is a certain amount of money, and it's a reasonably high amount of money that I need to make to sustain my life. And that's not even vacations and stuff. That's just our property taxes and everything else that come along with living here.
Cost of California.
Cost of California. So, I mean, I do need to be making, more than the average person probably does. But my partner and I are doing surrogacy. That's an enormous amount of money. But yeah, like when I really ask myself, do I need to make $1 million a year to be happy? No, like not at all. Like, would I be happy with half that? Yeah. Like, would I be happy with a little less than half that? A little less than half that is fine too, if that means complete happiness. So I think so many of us just think like we think the money is going to make us happy. And I think what we're going through right now, I think we're probably of similar generations. It used to be such that you did go to college, you did get the job, and you could buy the house. Now it's not like that anymore. Like, I think people are waking up to the fact that a lot of the next generation isn't going to be able to buy a home with the same ease that we are. And they're inquiring, as they should be, like, what is within my control? What's not? What kind of life do I want? Is it okay to, live in a small house compared to the one? Yeah. I mean, those are all decisions we get to make for ourselves, because at the end of the day, we decide the pain we want to feel. If you want to be climbing, I don't even want to say corporate ladder, but the professional ladder and figuring out how to make a lot of money, that's at the expense of something else, and we get to make those decisions. And I help people, and hopefully my story helps a lot of people inquire and make those decisions consciously rather than just doing what you think you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. And it does go back to just different people have different callings. It's like when you feel that tug on your heart, some people have this tug to go build multi-million-dollar corporations. Some people have on their heart to live humbly and serve, that one person. And not one is better than the other. It's just, like you said, we're all individuals. We're all different in our own regard. And we, as human beings, all have things. We have things that we struggle with. We have things that we thrive in. You and I are sitting here together talking, and there's things that you do really well, and there's things I do really well. There's things you might do poorly, and there's things I do poorly. It's like, that's the beauty of the human, like, existence, and how we're all different, and how we're all here to serve a different purpose. And I really believe what I'm hearing you say is just tap into that purpose, find what's really going to like make your heart swell with joy. And that's where contentment, that's where fulfillment, and that's where wealth really, I mean, in America, we say wealth, you have to have a lot of money, but at the end of the day, wealth is your health and your family and the things that really make your heart swell with joy.
I love that you said that
Go
right
ahead.
there. I mean, if I can just say one thing about that, because that's been this, like these past few months and really shifting my professional life to one that is completely fulfilling. It's been so interesting, and I'm happy to share this. I mean, I'm very comfortable being vulnerable, but like I realized, like, and this is the trauma. I mean, we think that like we need to fit ourselves into a box. Like we think we need to be doing something that somebody else is doing. We think that there's like we're looking outside of ourselves sometimes for validation. And I caught myself, and this is, this is why it's a journey. I mean, we're never completely perfect. We're never completely done working on ourselves. But this time I caught myself without having to have some sort of big wake up call. But I'm like trying to put myself into this box, like doing the things that I'm taught to do. Like this is how you build a coaching business. And then what I've realized over these past couple of weeks is like, I'm not like the webinar guy, really. Will you see me do a webinar once? I don't know, maybe. But like, I realize there's a lot of people out there that are doing all of these things that as I really got still and learned to listen to myself, what my intuition was telling me, I don't like doing those things. My partner even told me, he was like, you're better in person. I started embracing these in-person activities. I live in Los Angeles, so I have there's a lot of people here. So I don't like, that's not really a problem for me to find people locally. But as I started unpacking things like, I see so many coaches that present themselves perfectly polished. This is what I do. This is what I'm going to teach you to do. No, like the vulnerability, I like that. Not a lot of people do that. So that works out great. I have this cooking side of me. Like I haven't found a coach that is like inviting people into their homes for events and cooking for them. And I am in 2025, I'm going to start a coaching and cooking program where I invite people to tap into their artistic abilities and learn how to cook while we're working through life problems together. All of these things that feel so good to me, like beyond good. Like I could be in the kitchen 18 hours a day, maybe not every day, but most days I could be in the kitchen for 18 hours a day. All these things like that are so unique to me that I love doing that are not things that exist elsewhere. Like I get to do those things. Like our uniqueness is what sells us. Like it's not doing the same thing everybody else is doing. And it's really exciting for me to like be taking this like very, very, very unbeaten creative path and trusting that it will work out, and also seeing that it is working out and being able to help others do what I'm doing. And it's just, I can't believe this is my life right now.
Well, that's so awesome to hear. Before we wrap up today, I do want you to tell my audience, like maybe they're interested in working with you or where they could find you or where they could learn more about you, maybe some different, your website and how to connect with you.
Awesome. Yep. You can email me, matt@mattgerlach.com. That's fine. I have on my website a downloadable 6-step workbook that is really the distillation of my entire healing journey. And it helps you start to craft the life that you want and identify what's standing in the way of it and put a plan together. And in there's a link to book a free 45-minute coaching session with me. This is your time to ask any questions and no strings attached. I'm just honored to be able to help people create their dream lives and work through the obstacles that are holding them back. So if you like the 45-minute session, we can certainly talk about what it would look like to work together. But I just want to be able to serve people right now. And I believe very much that in serving people, this all works out the way it's supposed to in life. So please get in touch with me. I'm on Instagram. I'm on TikTok. YouTube, message me. It all comes here and I respond personally. So I'm just really, it's such an honor to be able to help anybody who's on this journey because I know how challenging it could be.
That's so beautiful. And what you're doing is great. And I always love coming in contact with people that are just really want to help other people grow and thrive because the world needs more of people like that. So thank you so much for everything you're doing. And thanks for coming on today and just sharing your knowledge with us. Super valuable stuff. So
thank you.
Thank you for listening to Through the Trauma podcast. If you have found value in this episode or believe in the mission behind what we are doing, please subscribe so that you never miss any future episodes. Also, be sure to check out our transformation project at transformationthroughtraumaproject.com, where we help inspirational stories get heard on a larger scale through multiple platforms. If you know someone who can benefit from this episode, please share it with them. Until next time.